My name is Lieutenant Commander Jeff Cassavant. When I'm not doing my reserve stuff, I'm an estate planning and probate attorney in Houston. I've got my own firm. You can see the name, address, telephone number, website, and everything else up there as well. This is a presentation that I normally give to laypersons, so it's not geared for attorneys. It's geared for those who aren't necessarily familiar with the legal concepts to begin with. But it's certainly a nice way to go over the fundamentals, if not the great details. I'm a big fan of just asking questions as you go along, not saving it up to the end. So if you do have a question, by all means, just let me know. And detachments, if you have a question, feel free to interrupt as well. Okay. This is something of my own design. I came up with the clever acronym of WINGTIP to talk about your estate planning, and it's basically the 7 basic aspects of an estate plan. Wills, insurance, non-testamentary transfers, gifts, and trusts. Those are the big 5, and then 2 more of my own creation, integration and periodic review. So, we'll start at the beginning. Wills are the foundation of every estate plan. There's absolutely no substitute for a will. Sometimes you get clients in and they want to know, when is it okay to use a will and when is it okay to use a trust? And the answer is, a trust is never a substitute for a will. Under the right circumstances, it can make a great supplement, but it should never be a substitute. So, do I really need a will? Well, I'm from Texas these days, and in Texas we like to do things as big as possible. So if you're going to talk about the dangers of intestacy, there's no other case study that's better than the case of Howard Hughes. Multi-billionaire, born in 1901, died in 1976. In between, he ended up dealing in mining, aircraft, movies, casinos, pretty much anything under the sun. And died with an estate that was finally valued at $361 million. By the time they got everything settled, that estate had grown to over $1 billion. And remember, this is in the late 1970s as well, when $1 billion actually meant something. He had no known children, no known brothers or sisters. His parents had long since died. He had 2 ex-wives that we knew about, numerous mistresses, a lot of cousins, 1 aunt, and then 3 states claiming him as a resident: Texas, California, and Nevada. All of that and absolutely no will. And the fine result was 16 years spent battling in courts. It took 3 years just to determine what his state of residence was. And this was important because a lot of these states have their own inheritance tax laws, and each of them wanted a piece of that estate. The only one that that did not have an inheritance tax was Nevada. And so obviously the heirs were a resident of Las Vegas and therefore a Nevada resident, and no tax was due. Ultimately, of course, the Texas courts ruled that he was a resident of Texas, and the California and Nevada courts never quite overcame that. 6 years spent searching for any unknown marriages or children. This was important because under the intestines in Texas, those that aunt were going to be coming into a windfall. However, if Mr. Hughes had a surviving wife, she would have inherited everything. If he had any children, they would have inherited everything. Or if his father, who was a suspected woman, had any children outside of his own marriage, that brother or sister would have inherited everything. In the meantime, there were a bunch of people coming forward to claim, A, I'm a long-lost relative, B, I'm a long, or C, I have a long-lost will. 36 different wills were offered for probate, and each one of them had to be stepped through and allowed its day in court. The most famous one was presented by a man named Melvin Dumar, who came up with an outrageous claim that he had picked up a traveling vagrant in the desert outside of Las Vegas, who turned out to be, guess what, Howard Hughes, who was just so thankful for Mr. Dumar's courtesy that he wrote a handwritten will leaving Dumar. How very convenient. Hundreds of people came forward to say, I'm a child of Howard Hughes, child. I've read a case of the most outrageous one was who sent a picture of himself clad in his full African regalia, And the only proof that he offered was, well, Howard Hughes was 6'4", and I'm 6'4", so that must prove it. Cleverly omitting the fact that Howard Hughes was a bigot and racist all his life. And finally, one putative spouse. This was a young starlet-to-be when Howard was working in the movie industry, who went out with Mr. Hughes on his yacht, and supposedly he told her, you know, we're out at sea, the captain has the power to marry us, and that way we can be married. And she, naive thing that she was, went along with it. She eventually settled her case for maybe a few $100,000. The terms have never been really disclosed. She had a brief bout of infamy when she posed for Playboy later that year, and no one has heard from her since. Meanwhile, hundreds of ongoing battles between the heirs and the business advisors for the entire Hughes empire over control of those assets. So you have to ask yourself, in the end, was it all worth it? Well, here in the end, of course it was, because by the time the dust settled, you had an estate worth over $1 billion, which was then put into a large trust and is now feeding that family for the next 100 years or so. So what's the more realistic situation? What happens to people like you